Welcome back to the channel, guys. In this video we're going to go ahead and prep and get everything ready on this fast LSXR 102 manifold and install it on the Mustang. I looked over the instructions and I went ahead and picked out all the bolts that I was going to need. So I have the 4 for the throttle body, I have the ones that go from the intake to the cylinder heads, and then I went ahead and put this port in that they give you, and I put the screw in for the map sensor. So there's two map sensors locations on this one. There's a back port and a front port, but the back port seems to be kind of like in the way of the booster line. Not that I'll be using that for that, but it doesn't really sit well with the GM 2.5 bar that I have here. So I'm going to do the front port, and since we're doing the front port, it's a little bit easier to keep everything clean. We can actually just take this upper shell completely off, and then we are going to drill it with a 15-30 seconds drill bit. So starting off, you have 5 bolts pre-installed. You have this one here, and then these 3 across the back, 1, 2, and 3. And the nuts are actually held captive in the manifold underneath, so when you spin them, they'll actually fall out. That's these 5 right here. And then once you do that, we can actually just pick up the whole upper assembly and separate it, just like that. I have the upper shell laid flat across the top of the table, so we're not putting unnecessary pressure down here under the throttle body when we're trying to drill. And then I'm just going to take out the map sensor screw, and I've already got my 15-30 seconds drill bit put up in the drill. It's a pretty big size. Most kits don't have this size. The kit I got was just at Harbor Freight. I figured this is composite and it's not going to make too much of a difference, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to drill it as straight as possible through. Was a little harder to drill through than I thought it would be, but that drill bit is definitely the right size. It fits pretty snugly in there. However, this bolt hole does not line up at all. I don't know if it's because it's meant for a different sensor or what. So what I'm going to end up having to do is put it this way and then take a washer on this screw to hold the map sensor down. It fits pretty tight. I don't think it'll be an issue, but not exactly what I expected on a $1,600 manifold. Now that we got our map sensor in, the next bump in the road for me is the MAT sensor. I don't quite know where I want to put it. It's kind of hard because the upper shell costs like $400, so it's like if I put a hole in that and it's bad, like, okay, but it's like if I put a hole in this and it's bad, it's like another $800 or $900, so it's like I don't know what I want to do. What I'm thinking about doing is cutting off this brake booster port because I'm not using a booster, and then tapping it with a 3/8 MPT and putting it in this way. I looked at it and it'll fall like right under this runner. And that might be okay. I might try to decide to put it like somewhere over here. I think the plug would be a little bit easier to access. I'm not exactly sure, but what I'm going to do right now is pull this number 7 runner out so that I can work in here and try to make a decision on what I want to do. How's that saying go? Something about measuring twice and cutting once or drilling once or something like that. Either way, I test fitted the intake onto the Mustang just to find out that where the MAT sensor is like kind of right up by the firewall. It'd be like impossible to plug and unplug it. I tried to plug it in first and then slide the intake back, but it hits the firewall before the intake clears to where it should. So kind of no bueno there. Now I'm kind of in a crisis. So what I'm going to do is pull this out and see if I can get a NPT plug to fit in there to seal off that hole. And then I have to decide whether I'm going to try to drill it lower down here or try to put it in the charge pipe or what. The next step here is that we need to change the lower O-rings on our injectors so that they fit this intake. They are included in the kit, these ones here. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on a time lapse, switch all those out, and get the rails mounted on the intake. For anyone watching this video trying to figure out how these brackets go on for the fuel rails, it's like this, like a little L, and the fast intake is going to face outward. So you, like that, and the fast intake part fits outward. I have the fuel rails installed now, and I cut the video. I was just getting kind of irritated. I have Snake Eater 1500s, And I changed the lower O-rings, like as you've seen with the fast ones, but the upper O-rings were like a super tight fit. Like I had to put a little more pressure on them than I really wanted to get them to sit in there. But they're in there now, and I got everything seated into the intake. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my seal and my throttle body on and put my crossover hose and my plugs in. I have the O-rings in now, and the fuel rails are all the way tightened down, throttle body is on, and I put those little rubber like bumpers that you get on the bottom. There's 3 little spots to put them. So that's all good. My crossover line is a little bit long, so I might have to make a new one. That's really no big deal. That Evil Energy PTFE line stuff is like super easy to work with. So from here, I think I'm going to go ahead and move all the harnesses out of the way in the back of the car and drop the intake down on it. I got my initial oops here filled with a 1/4 NPT. There was still some thick plastic in the back that I was able to tap and get that in there really nice. And then I put the MAT sensor here, and it clears the firewall here, and it's kind of right in the middle of the runners where I want it. So that's good. I went ahead and made this crossover line, and I do have a fuel pressure sensor that goes here, so it's a little weird, but that works pretty good. As far as the coolant crossover, I bent up a truck one from the junkyard and was able to make it clear. So I'll actually be using that instead of the Chevrolet Camaro one that they like advise you to use. My trans dipstick has to go because my fuel rail actually sits right up against it. So I got a new one of those on the way anyway because I don't really like the flexible dipsticks. And then I have to extend this fuel line because the rail is further in. I got everything tightened down and pretty much installed. All I have to do is put a vacuum cap on the back, hook up my steam port line, and then I need to connect my throttle cable. This is my new one, so the one I had cut a little bit shorter since the Holley intake sat a little further backwards, so it wouldn't reach this one. And I bought a throttle cable on Amazon, and that wasn't the move. The first time I tried to even press down the pedal, it just completely frayed up the line and everything. So I actually went to Walmart and got bicycle shifter cables. It was $10 for a pack of 4. And the 3 of them are pretty short, but they have one really long one. I mean, you could probably use it for even a truck or a car longer than this one. And I just put the cable in, I like snipped the end off and just put it through the factory hole, and it works really good. So cheap fix for that. I just got to connect that up, and after that I'll go get some data for you guys. So the lines get all really confusing, so we're just going to use the information we have off the sidebar. But as you can see, I made 2 pretty similar hits. This is just a comparison feature in Holley EFI. And these lines are pretty similar, even though one's just a couple seconds later. It's just the way the data log was recorded. So we seen spool around the same time, and I ran these out to about the same peak. Anything after that is just after I shifted and let out of it, but as far as that, that's pretty normal. But looking over here, we can see that the RPMs were real close, 5448 and 5479 at those peaks. And then if you want to look at the boost, 6.5 and 6.6 pounds, so same amount of boost. But where it gets pretty interesting is the fuel flow. Our max fuel flow before was 240 pounds per hour, and now we're at 252 pounds per hour. So we're definitely using more fuel, we definitely have more air, and it's definitely making more power. But this definitely is not what I expected it to do. Maybe that Holley intake manifold wasn't hurting me so bad all along. Maybe it was the cam choice I had. Not too sure. But part of it is this timing table. And the timing table for this car is all sorts of messed up compared to some other ones that I've seen. I don't really know what's going on with it. Let me get it off the home screen here. So the timing on this is all sorts of funky. They usually do not look like this. And if you look at the actual like 3D graph and kind of run over here, you can see we don't have a nice smooth area. It kind of drops and does a bunch of funny stuff. And some of the timing numbers, like especially down here in this area, which is where it comes into boost, are not like other tunes I've seen that seem to make more power or work better. So I'm going to be playing with this in the upcoming days. I am taking the car to the track in a couple of days here. I got a couple things to button up on it before I do that, but I'm hoping to make some changes and see if we can get this car down into the 10-second range. So wrapping this video up, definitely not the result I was expecting. Thought it would spool a little bit sooner with this manifold, but that's not the case. It definitely does have a little bit more torque down low. It does drive a little bit better, and you can tell that it has more power, but on the same hand, I thought it'd have a drastic effect, which it does not. Oh well, you live and you learn. And now everything's a little bit wonky, so I actually made a hit at work and ran it out in first gear, and went over my boost number to the point where fuel pressure dropped and I had to get out of it, which kind of sucks because it was feeling really good for a second there, but what can you do? So I'm definitely going to be working on getting everything dialed in, trying to get back to that 13 pounds of boost setting, and fixing those timing numbers to see if we can get it to come up faster, and then see if we can get a good pass at the track when we go later. But that's about it for this video, guys. If you guys could like and subscribe, I'd surely appreciate it. Leave a comment. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I'll see you guys in the next one.